Hi, friends, and welcome to How to Write an Outstanding Personal Statement. I'm Ethan. I'm co-hosted and supported, and my partner in crime today is Tom Campbell, whom you'll meet more in just a minute. We're excited you're here. Today, we're going to talk about what is the purpose of the personal statement. We're going to talk about fun ways to find your topic, starting with an exercise we're going to do in like less than a minute. We're going to talk about core values and why those are so important in this whole process and application. We're going to talk about 2 successful personal statement examples. I'm going to walk you through, not the whole essay because that would take too long, but I'm going to talk to you about why I think those are awesome. I'm going to talk about some topics that you should maybe avoid, and then we're going to do Q&A. But because I like getting creative and because it'll allow you to get to know me and I suppose us a little bit, because Tom, you do this exercise, I know, a bunch, but I want to just kick us off with a little bit of an exercise. And this is going to involve some typing. And so first, all you have to do is just listen to me. But if you want to like multitask and like get somewhere to type, feel free. But the way this works is I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute. And I'm just going to literally tell you a list of things that I love. And then I'm going to explain what this has to do with essay writing. All right. I love Tom's shirt. I love I love that I'm not feeling sick anymore. I love that I'm like breathing clearly. I love this work that we get to do. I love the color blue, if you couldn't guess. I love the games on the shelf behind me. I love the view outside the window behind the computer screen. I love pickleball. Oh God, I feel so old saying that. I love reading. I have a new book I noticed like right there that's arrived that I haven't opened yet. I love I love not knowing what I'm going to say next. I love awkward pauses. I love like generally like awkward social situations and like laughing at them. I love my daughter. This is now I have to list everybody in my family. Let me get really specific. I love that my daughter, who's 8, is like kind of getting into basketball right now and is like, Dad, are we going to watch the Lakers game? Sad note. Never mind. I'm not going to get into the Lakers. But that's my version of it. And I want to just invite y'all, even though it seems random, to why would you do this at the start of a webinar, to try this with me for 1 minute, whether you are a student, parent, or a counselor. And you know what? Let's give them an option, Tom. Some people are going to be like, I don't want to do this exercise. So we're going to give them a form to fill out if they want to do this. And then we're just going to make everybody do the form anyway. So let's do this. Well, let's share the form in the chat, which is just to get to know you better. But for those of you who would be down to try this exercise, I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute, and I'd love for you to try it. So here goes. 1 minute, just make a list of things that you love, and then I'm going to explain to you what this has to do with college essays. All right, 3, 2, 1, go. If you just joined us and you're wondering what's happening, we're doing an exercise where you're writing down as many things you can think of that you love. And then if you want to, you can share it in the chat.
We're also sitting in silence.
All right, time's up. If you feel inspired to share in the chat, go for it. Oh, good. Some of you are doing it already. We've got playing bass. We've got coffee. By the way, this is just like a collage of like everything, all the people in this temporary community of this webinar, things that we love. Kids, our kids, Marvel and DC, mystery novels.
At first I was like, everyone loves Fortnite, but then I realized it's Ladanian over and over and over again. Just really wants us to know that they love Fortnite, and I love that you're just brimming with love for that.
We've got grass-fed beef and protein, tennis, family, school, and friends. Beautiful. Okay, thank you. We hear you. Pause. You can keep sharing, but I'm gonna pause on context, and I'm gonna share with you in just maybe like, actually, it's going to be like 10 minutes when I'm going to share with you what this has to do with college essays. By way of setting context, we've got a little poll that we'd love for y'all to fill out, and we'll reshare it. It's going to be in the chat. And Tom, will you just give actually, the context is pretty simple. We want to get to know y'all better. We want to know who is with us on this session today. And just at College Essay Guy in general, we're trying to get to know who you are. So if you would, while we're talking here in the intro in the next 2 minutes, just fill this out. That would be so helpful. We're so grateful that we are going to give randomly a book away to somebody who fills this out. So we'll do like a little raffle lottery style. And all you need to do is fill out the form that we just linked and share it in the chat. In fact, you know what? I'm going to stick it because I can do it as like a sticky message at the top. So it's going to be at the top of this doc. All right. So we're going to do some quick PSAs, and then we're going to jump into the content. Tom is going to introduce himself and talk about what colleges are looking for. So the quick PSAs are these. Number one, we've got 2 really rad summer courses coming up for students. They are basically, they're with me. I'm going to guide you through writing the personal statement and then your application and supplements. They're awesome. They're pay what you can, so there's no financial barrier to attending. I'll tell you more about them at the end. And then we've got a rad course for counselors that's coming up with Sanjay Mitchell. It's on how to design and run an effective college counseling department. And I'll put in links to those in just a few minutes. But that's pretty much it. Those are the PSAs. Tom, I think I'm just gonna kick it over to you for intro and telling us all about, what brings you here and what qualifies you to be talking about such a topic.
Your timing could not be more perfect, Ethan, because just as you say that, the train starts rolling behind me. So hopefully me shouting is coming in loud and clear. But hi, everyone. My name is Tom Campbell. I use he, him pronouns. I'm College Essay Guy's community manager, and I'm about to actually come up on my 1-year anniversary with College Essay Guy next week. So excited. I think my anniversary gift was this shirt that I'm wearing, which is actually a hand-me-down from one Ethan Sawyer. So I love that Ethan was willing to, give away the clothes on his very back for me. So I'm here in various capacities, but just to help provide more context and insight about what colleges are looking for. To you all, many of you, most likely, if you're tuning into this webinar, you may be juniors in high school who are just about to start thinking about putting your application together. Maybe you're building out your college list, trying to think about what you want for your future and all the endless possibilities that are out there, which can be like really scary and very anxiety inducing. So hopefully we can provide more clarity to you and more insight into what people on the other end of the computer screen, which, I was going to say the desk, but like people in college admissions read applications on a computer screen because, 2023, that's the thing. So CEG, someone asked in the chat, great. It's a great point to kind of take a step back and zoom out and realize that this is the intro, right? We're introducing CEG, which is College Essay Guy, which is what you tuned in to learn more about today. But in terms of my background and kind of why I'm here sharing these insights with you, prior to working at College Essay Guy, hosting webinars and podcasts and courses, my background is in college admissions and college counseling. So I started my admissions career at my alma mater, College of the Holy Cross, in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is a wonderful liberal arts college that I highly recommend if you're interested in. And after working there for 2 years, I transitioned to working at Pomona College in Southern California. It's one of the Claremont colleges, if you've heard of those before, where I worked for 4 admission cycles. And I got to see, especially even in a more selective setting, what a college that has so many highly qualified applicants, how they were able to whittle down that number of students to those that were chosen to be admitted in the end. So in terms of the question, what are colleges looking for? The kind of on the surface, on paper, I guess on the screen answer is one that you're probably pretty familiar with, right? So colleges, as part of their application process, they ask for a lot of information from students. They want to know who you are and your background, where you come from, information along those lines. But they also want to know your academic record, your grades, your transcript, the courses that you've taken in high school. They want to know what are your future goals and aspirations. They want to know from your school, from a teacher or a counselor or folks on that end, how you impact those spaces, what you contribute to those communities, what areas of impact you may have been able to contribute to your community. So there's a lot of information that is part of a college application for most colleges in the US. that is being asked of students, and they all have different purposes. And the personal statement, which is what you're tuning in to hear more about today, is really where you are able to take ownership as a rising junior. So if you are an 11th grader, you're finished your third year in high school, you're about to embark on your fourth and final year, maybe a fifth year, who knows? Everyone's years are different, right? But this is kind of, for so many parts of the college process, at this point, as you start to kind of transition from these summer months into the fall of your senior year, so much of your college process is kind of like set in stone, right? Your transcript and the classes that you've taken in high school, maybe you had some flips and dips and things that kind of didn't really go so smoothly. But it's not really productive to kind of turn back the clock and want to go back in the past and make those changes. Now is the time to embrace the pieces of the process that you have control over. And the personal statement, your essays, the colleges that you choose to apply to, those are all examples of things that you have ownership of and have autonomy over. And it's a really empowering feeling once you start to lean into that. But in terms of what colleges are looking for, I think one thing that I really wanted to spend some time talking about today before Ethan and myself guide you through a series of exercises to help you, I think a little about these qualities and values that are a part of you. But colleges really want to know the skills, qualities, values, and interests that you'll bring to their community. And the different sources of information, the transcript, the recommendations, your activities list, and extracurriculars, those all send certain messages about that. But I would say that the writing samples, your personal statement, and supplemental essays, if the colleges that you're applying to have additional pieces of writing that they're asking for of their students, are really hoping to identify, so high achievement, high dash achievement, that's one H, that many colleges will say, we're looking for high achieving students who, achieve greatness in some capacity, whatever that means, right? But the two H's that I would say are actually not talked about as frequently, and in my experience reading thousands of applications, are not quite as commonly seen, are heart and humanity. And those are the two that I really want you to kind of think about as you start to brainstorm your college process and the story that you want to communicate to colleges. Those two H's, high achievement, whether or not you feel like you embody that as part of your high school journey, that's, push that off to the side, because there's a lot of high achievement out there. That's not something that's rare or uncommon or less common to be seen in a college application pool. But I would argue that moments where you kind of show your heart and show human edges to yourself are so much more rare and so much less common than people may think, because oftentimes students are afraid to show those edges of themselves. They think that, a certain level of perfection and accolades and all these high achievement and grades are really going to communicate that, but it's not necessarily the end all be all. So hopefully that's just some general advice and a preface to what we're about to dive a little more deeply into throughout the rest of this hour together. But definitely want you to remember those two H's and keep that in that, plant that seed.
I love it.
Plant that hydrangea.
So how do you do that is the question, right? That you're probably wondering about. It's like, okay, how do we figure out which parts of my heart or which parts of my, humanity to show? And there's an exercise that we love called the identities exercise. And it's relatively simple. And it also only takes a couple minutes for you to at least get started with it. So I want to do this one, and combined with the I love exercise, you're going to have two options that should hopefully give you some interesting ideas. And then I'm going to show you how each of those could potentially lead to a personal statement. So this exercise is pretty simple. It's basically 2 minutes. We set a timer, and I want to ask you if you can come up with as many different, sorry, I'm reading the chat. I should stop doing that. I want you to list as many different ways that you identify as you can think of. Okay. So identities, what are some different ways that we identify? Well, it could be that we identify based on where we live, or who we are in our birth order, or race, or gender, or things we like, or things we're interested in. So I'm going to throw up this quick example chart so you can see some of my different identities. There we go. So take a look. So what communities are you a part of? So for example, I live in Los Angeles, so I am a Los Angelino. And you can actually go ahead and start if you want. I'm a third culture kid because I grew up in both Latin America, like Spain, Ecuador, Colombia, and the US. But I wasn't quite like one, or the other. I was kind of both, so third culture kid. There are some things that I enjoy doing. Like I could say that I action, like something that I like to do is play sports. So I am an athlete. or things that I like to do. In high school, especially, I did theater and I listened to jazz. So I might identify as a jazz listener or a traveler. You can also think about it in terms of circumstance, like where you were born or where you go on a daily basis. So let's set a timer. And I want you to see, and you're totally welcome to do this in the chat. And I've kind of already been talking, so I'm gonna do like a 90-second timer. And I want you to see if you can come up with at least 5 to 7 identities. Bonus points if you can do more. And think of the communities that you're a part of. And third culture just means I'm not this culture, I'm not this one, I'm kind of both. Feel free to throw them into the chat because it'll help other people get ideas as well.
I think just to maybe inspire some creativity here, as I'm looking at the place column, one that I'm kind of really present to right now is that like I'm from a place that like sometimes requires some defending. I'm from Springfield, Massachusetts, which for some people from Massachusetts in the United States, if you're not familiar with it, it's a state where the western part of the state is very different than the eastern side, and a lot of people have like negative connotations about Springfield and what it means. And of course, like whenever I hear that, I'm like, you're not from there. You're not allowed to crap on Springfield. Only I am, right? But it's just, I know what it's like to be from a place where like, you know, you feel like you want to defend the people who are from there and everything along those lines. So it can be not just as like explicit and direct as, you know, I'm from insert city or insert state. You can kind of think a little more deeply about like what that place means to you and how you like, how it interacts or corresponds with your own lived experience.
Lovely, thank you. I'm going to give y'all another minute just to think through this a little bit more. These are beautiful coming through. Hopefully, if you're having trouble thinking of ideas, check out the chat because there are a lot of cool ideas. And we're going to do
Someone mentioned that Springfield is the birthplace of basketball. You're right.
Nice. All right, we'll do the silence thing so that y'all can think of things, so we won't be talking at you for at least half a minute. Great. This is lovely. Okay. So a question that I often get at this point is like, wait, Ethan, what does this have to do with college essays? So if part of what we're trying to do here is bring heart and humanity to otherwise something that can be somewhat sterile, because if you're just otherwise words on a page potentially and like some numbers and stuff, part of what we're trying to help you do here, if we had to think like big picture, what is the purpose of the personal statement? In my view, it's the way to show the skills, qualities, values, and interests that you're going to bring with you to the college campus. So skills, qualities, values, and interests. But you can't just like, I guess you could list like a bunch of skills and qualities. What we're looking for when we're looking for a great personal statement topic is a focusing lens, which is to say a thing that you can write about, that you can pick, that will allow you to talk about different sides of yourself. So what do I mean by this? Well, it could be, for example, that you decide that your topic is something that you love or that you know a lot about. So, for example, if I was going to write a college essay today, the thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about is like board games. So I might write about board games because that's something that I love and know a lot about, and it connects to a lot of different sides of me. But students choose all kinds of things that they love and know a lot about. Some students write about a particular subject that they're interested in, and that connects to different sides of them. Some students write about, I don't know, blacksmithing, and it doesn't have to be weird like that. Some students write about food and their love of cooking. Other students write about like certain hobbies they have. And the thing that one of the takeaways that I want you to have from this session is that you can actually use those things and write an essay that is quote unquote like deep. Because sometimes students are like, well, that's not going to be very deep, or it's not going to be like life-changing. Some of these topics are going to help you go wide and talk about lots of different sides of yourself in a way that could be actually more effective than trying to find like a deep, dark story or secret and just like wring that for all it's worth. Because there's this misconception, I think, out there that you have to write about a challenge, and it's just not true. Okay. There's so many awesome things that you could write about. Some of them are things that you love, or as we just brainstorm a little bit, identities. So I'm going to show you some example essays in just a minute, but it could be that you pick one of your identities or several of your identities and connect them to different sides of yourself. So for example, I'm just going to give some examples from the thing, amateur radio operator. So it could be that James uses amateur radio operator, which is a somewhat uncommon topic, to talk about different sides of James, which we're going to brainstorm in just a second. It could be that I'm just going to use some different ones. I'm just going to grab one. I'm trying to grab ones that are problem solver. There we go. So it could be, Jesse, that your essay is about, I am a problem solver. And your essay is a series of moments of different problems that you've been interested in solving. And then cool final paragraph, some problems I'm interested in solving in college, maybe based on the thing that you're interested in studying. There you go, Jesse. You're welcome. Or it could be that you actually end up choosing different identities, which is to say different sides of yourself, and brainstorming how each one of those shows some other side of you. Okay, but let's do a second exercise, which is what I call making a jellyfish, to brainstorm how could I take one of these things that I've written here and turn it into an actual essay topic. So here's what I want you to do. First, pick something that you feel like is maybe less common. In other words, people are probably, not everybody's going to write about this. And see if you can find something from your either I love list that we brainstormed at the start or identity. And if you're like, I don't know if I can come up with something uncommon, then what you can do is just pick several of your identities and go like this. So I'm going to have you, if you're picking something that you love or an identity that's somewhat uncommon, I'm going to have you write it at the top of the page. So for example, I'm going to pick games. So I'm writing games at the top of my paper. And by the way, you don't have to write this if you don't want to. You could just type it. But I'm going to pick games. And then I'm going to give you a link to this exercise called the values exercise. And we're going to play a little game. And I want you to see if you can connect your topic to at least 5 different values from this list. All right, so here it is. I'm sharing it with you. And I'm going to scroll up and down on this list here. Take your topic, whatever it is, and connect it to some values. So for example, I'll go first. If I was going to connect games to some values, I could connect games to creativity. So I would write that down because I love making up new games, inventing them. I would connect games to inclusion because I've learned a whole lot about inclusivity for games that do and don't work. I've also learned a lot about I've made myself more productive by playing games with the things that I have, the projects that I have to do and the work that I have to do. Okay, so you kind of see what we're doing here. So your turn. Let's take them. I'll give you a minute and a half, and I want you to pick either something that you love or an identity, and see how many different values you can connect it to. And again, option B is if you're like, I don't have one thing that I'm interested in, then just write down several identities and which value could you connect that community with or that identity with. And if that's confusing, let me know in the chat. And I'll scroll down the list a little bit. These aren't the only values, of course, but there's some good ones. Yes, totally. You can see the whole list. Somebody asked to see the whole list. I'll just put it in the chat. Here we go. Okay. So whoever feels comfortable, great. So we've got excellence, growth, authenticity, community, excitement. What does that connect to? I'm so curious to know what is the thing that connects them all. So if you feel inspired, I'd love to know. There we go. Beautiful. Allegra's got an awesome example. Thank you. Please feel free to share. So Allegra's got journaling, which connects to vulnerability, gratitude, purpose, empathy, and patience. Beautiful. Yona's got history lover, connects to culture, beauty, wonder, community, belonging. Awesome. Aishwarya, it's got the power of language, which connects to religion, beauty, diversity, respect, love, and community. And what you'll notice is that once you do this, if you do decide to do the jellyfish version, you'll have like the thing that you put at the top, and then all of these different values. You don't have to obviously write it out, but what this will give you, I'll give you my example here, is like, so I've connected games to listening. Because one of the things I've learned by playing lots of different kinds of games, and there are many games that test our listening, is that, what have I learned? Let me just try and come up with an insight on the spot. One of the things I've learned from listening is there's like the game that we're playing that's happening. Like, let's say Tom and I are playing, I don't know, poker. So there's the game of poker, and there's the sounds of the actual game. And then there's this other like meta game that's happening in poker. And it's often involves like a balance of power that's happening with who has the most chips and who's going to therefore be able to exert their power on the other person. So there's like listening to like what is happening in terms of the actual talk of the game. And then there's listening to like what's not being said, like what's happening in the meta, as it were. Okay, that's my improvised moment of like what games have taught me about listening. But what I could then do is ask myself, okay, well, what does this have to do with life? Like, are there certain situations in life where I'm listening not just to what's being said in the conversation, but for example, what's not being said? Absolutely, right? And I could give you some examples from my life or from my extracurricular activities where learning to listen in this meta way and hearing what's not being said has been incredibly useful. And guess what? That would be a really cool paragraph for a college essay on games that uses at the start how listening in poker has taught me about whatever I decide to, say is my insight. So this is the game we're playing, is we're going, how do we take a thing that we already know a lot about, like games, because that's going to give you lots of material to be able to make connections. And we're trying to connect it to different sides of ourselves. Because what colleges are most interested in isn't necessarily your love of games, although that's cool. This is really just the way of getting at all of these things, like listening, like family, like creativity, because it's your commitment to these values and how these manifest in your life that are going to tell the college what kind of student you're going to be, and even more important than like what kind of community member you're going to be. Because really colleges are putting together, they're assembling a community of students. Now, this works in a couple different ways. Let me show you some examples. And I'm going to take you inside a resource. Here we go. So, there we go. All right. So let me show you two different example essays. And I'm going to go into here. Okay. So this is what I'm calling the identity method. And this is something that you get access to this summer if you join me on the course. Otherwise, you'll see this essay on the website. You can just search "This is me, college essay guy." Actually, let me show the other example first. So this is a student who was writing about their identity as a pirate. Wait, what? Yeah. Then this is how their essay begins. There's nothing worse than waking up and realizing you were meant to be a pirate. And of course, it's a joke, but it's kind of clever and kind of fun. It was around the age of 9 when it dawned on me. And this student's talking about, pretending to sail the 7 seas with his grandfather and then realizing, you know what? I was meant to be a pirate. Had the powerful overlords of the world been more inquisitive and precise, I would have actually been one. There's not much else that can be done unless the invention of time travel is just around the corner. But what this student learned is that this identity of a pirate is actually kind of a good vibe for him because, like pirates who, for example, if you look at this paragraph, I often let my imagination run free, even if for a few minutes, allowing my inner pirate to come out and play. For example, tracking the patterns in the night sky during nightly walks with my dog. When my family goes to the beach, I take my brother's crab searching, scouring the beaches and tide pools for little crustaceans. Even a hike will often be accompanied by a little treasure map that my father and I will use to locate geocaches along the trail. So what is the student's value? Like, what do they care about? And because there's a 30-second delay and it's going to take you 30 seconds to respond to me, I'll say, yes, you're right. Something like, I don't know, adventure or curiosity or exploration. Now, the student could have just said, I like exploring things. Here are some examples, but it would have been kind of boring. So what's cool is that the student has found this overarching theme of pirate and been like, oh, here's how I'm kind of like a pirate. And then here's some really cool specific examples with sentences that no other student would write. Next paragraph. I'm not going to go through all these because you'll kind of get the idea. This student's talking about, the image of Captain Kidd, researching metaphysical explanations of 10 dimensions. And essentially, this is about, exploration intellectually and learning about the world, exploring, knowledge. So if this paragraph is about physical exploration, this one ends up being about intellectual exploration. Then the student says, I know that when people think of the word pirate, they think of a teenager who likes to air guitar in his room and dream of making movies in Iceland. Oh, sorry, they don't think of a teenager who likes to air guitar in his room and dream of making movies in Iceland. But my unmistakable sense of adventure and curiosity defines me. I become an avid astronomer, an aspiring filmmaker, philosophical nerd, a music geek, and an unqualified therapist. Now, these are all qualities that, even though I went through the essay fast, you didn't get to see all of them. These are all identities that he somehow talks about in specific ways in the essay. So the other thing that this essay is doing is that, yes, the student brainstormed what are some different identities that he possesses or things that he's into, and what connects them all. Well, they all kind of go under this overarching umbrella of the pirate. So that's an example of focusing on a single identity. But that's not the only way that you have to do this. It could be that you pick several identities, like I mentioned. It could be that, for example, the student writes about being Mexican, and they describe in the first paragraph the sound of frying empanadas and the smell of burning peppers. My mother calling me mi vida, my relatives kissing my cheek. Running but never hiding from the dreaded chancla and always responding with muy bien, ¿y tú? So what you'll notice in this paragraph is the student is taking their identity, Mexican identity, and they're bringing it to life with specific sounds, sights, smells, essentially invoking the senses so that we really get a sense of what it means to the student to identify as Mexican. And then in the next paragraph, the student says, those are all me. I'm Chinese. And in the next one, the student gives lots of different specific examples of being named after the dragon for strength and living for 3 years in Shanghai. The student writes about the constant pressure to get good grades, my father's desire for me to become a doctor, and the never-ending, how are you so bad at math, you're Asian. So what I like about this paragraph is that, one, it's surprising because it's sort of like each detail is showing us some new side. And also, we didn't expect it to go from like one identity to another. So there's something like, okay, interesting. Where is this going? It's raising questions for me. But the other thing I really like about this is the student is taking challenges that they're experiencing and weaving them in as part of a larger tapestry of their identities. So this student isn't just going like, hey, I get pressure to get good grades and it's really tough. And let me tell you all about it. Why? I don't know, because I feel like this is in some ways defines me. No, the student isn't saying this just defines me. They're saying, yes, that this is part of me, but it's just one part of one of my identities. Those are all me, but I'm also American. And the student's talking about this other identity, which is like being a citizen with the freedom to vote, shopping sprees at Target and a constant diet of fast foods. There's also nice moments of vulnerability in here where the student says, there's full acceptance of the consumer society and a rather unhealthy addiction to social media and technology. Going to football games on Friday nights and watching Netflix on Saturdays, always watching my weight, always looking at others, always wishing, always wanting for more. Sometimes students feel like they have to like prove themselves in every single moment of the application. Like they're like, I'm not, in some sense, I have to let them know that I'm good enough to go there. If you have great grades and you've got extracurricular activities that show you've been involved, and you've got recommendation letters where folks are vying for you and saying, yes, this person is awesome, then really what the purpose, as Tom was saying earlier, of your personal statement is to humanize you and to let them know that you are going to be a cool person to hang out with if you come to their campus. Somebody who, yes, watches Netflix on Saturday nights and sometimes thinks about their weight in the case of this student. One of the things I love about this essay and both of these essays is they show the 4 qualities of, in my mind, a great personal statement. And they are, 1, values. So some of the things that we talked about earlier of like thinking about what are the different sides of you that are important and making sure those are woven in. Number 2, insight, which is to say moments that show some aspect of you that isn't obvious from elsewhere in the application and maybe surprises us. The third thing is vulnerability, which is to say the essay is personal and it's giving details. I'm not saying you have to be like, oh, you have to like sort of show your heart and like talk about all your biggest secrets. No, but letting them know that, hey, this is something that is personal to me. Here's what matters to me. And craft, in terms of like making sure that the essay is clearly something that you've spent, some time revising. Craft can be done in lots of different ways. I know it's a complex word, but essentially those are the 4 qualities of an awesome personal statement. I want to pause because I've been talking a lot, and Tom, kick it over to you for just a minute to say, like, what do you have thoughts? What else would you add to this in terms of like either these examples or just why you feel like the personal statement's important?
Yeah, I think 2 of the things that I'm most present to right now, just looking at some of the feedback in the chat, is some people saying like, oh, this seems like a little like surprisingly like casual and light. I think the first essay in particular, the pirate essay, than what I would expect for a personal statement or something that's like college-y. And another kind of point that was brought up is maybe that kind of a surprise around like the amount of like metaphors and kind of imagery that are in an essay. And so I think both of those statements, I think, every college, there are speaking of humanity, right? There are human readers on the other side of who are reading your college application to however many schools you decide you want to apply to. The personal statement is typically going to be sent to the vast majority of colleges you decide you want to apply to, especially if you're applying through, say, the Common Application. But in my experience, I think students are often afraid to kind of lean into their personal voice and be more conversational and casual in these essays because they associate college with a certain level of achievement and perfection and curation, and feel like there's a high risk with potentially maybe rubbing the person on the other end the wrong way, or them thinking that you're not taking this seriously enough. And what I guess I want to say in response to that is that there are going to be a lot of pieces of information in your application that are communicating how seriously you take your life and the things that you value and the things that you want to lean into and the areas of impact that you've created in your community. There is going to be space and room in your application that doesn't necessarily require your own words, that are going to be communicating those messages about your commitment to your education, about your commitment to people around you, right? This is kind of like a different space that is really a whole different can of worms, whatever, than these other components. So I just kind of want to give that kind of green light and permission to say that, like, as a reader, like someone who's read, thousands of these essays, it's so much more common for students to use like really sterile, kind of safe language and frameworks that end up just kind of oftentimes blending in with a lot of ways that students have communicated a similar story. So the more kind of like personal voice and relatability that you can make with a reader, and again, admissions readers are reading these pretty quickly, so it can be hard to like foster that. And again, you don't know if the person on the other end is going to be like, some millennial diva like yours truly. But I would say in general, people on the other end are less buttoned up than you may anticipate or may think about. Maybe when it comes to like, images in media that you've seen of college, or just like images of people around like a, boardroom table with tweed jackets and whatnot, right? I wouldn't say that that's really a very accurate portrayal, as Hollywood's all about embellishment, right? The no filter reality of college admissions is a lot different than I think what people think. And then the other point about metaphors and kind of imagery, I do think, there's obviously sometimes where people kind of lean on, for example, like many of you probably don't know Forrest Gump, but it was a very popular movie from the 90s that won a ton of awards. And there's a very famous line from it that's, life is like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. And people sometimes will use metaphors that are really, I would say, like common, like, oh, I'm like a, chessboard. I'm a lot of different pieces that represent different sides of myself. Sometimes that can be, I think, done in a really creative and original way. And then sometimes, those metaphors and images can just be more common and kind of the stories that have kind of been told before. And it's not to say that originality and kind of having something that no one else has ever done before is the absolute goal here. But I would say that there's a lot of space and value in communicating your story with that craft that Ethan mentioned, which is that storytelling element that gives it kind of a distinctive eye-catching flair to someone who, again, thinking about who's on the other end, when they've read a lot of similar experiences that have been told in a very similar formula, for lack of a better word. Using kind of original imagery, I think, can be a really great way to distinguish yourself.
Yeah, great points. And, some of the questions coming in, folks are asking about, how do you show voice, which I put a link in the chat. And how do I, how casual can I be is what I read in the question. And what I would say is, like, if you're hitting on those 4 things, you've got core values, you're showing insights, there's maybe a little vulnerability in there, it's well crafted, I think you can lean more into the casual side of things. But still, you want to make sure that the information is getting in there. And I don't just mean information like facts, like stuff that you can put in other parts of your application, but information that wouldn't be in there, that doesn't appear on your transcript, that isn't in your activities list. And it's giving more context of like who you are and what you're about. Another question that somebody asked, Luke asked, is how impactful is your personal statement to your chance of getting into a college? Great question. First of all, colleges are looking primarily, most schools are looking at your grades, your rigor of your classes. In other words, how hard your classes were, as the main indicator of like, are you even getting into the conversation? And then after that, there's a whole bunch of other things to consider. Now, schools used to consider as the second thing tests, standardized tests, SAT, ACT, but there's been a big movement to test optional and test blind. And so those have kind of dropped down. And if you look at, and I can bring this up, but there's like a chart from the National Association of College Admission Counselors. The next thing on the list is essays, and then teacher recommendation letters, and then extracurricular activities, and a whole bunch of other things. But what I usually like to say to students, and what we usually like to say, is like, essays matter most for students who are applying and they're being compared with students who have similar profiles. In other words, let's say Tom and I are both applying to Pomona. We've both got 4.0 GPA. We've got similar extracurricular activities. Then it's like, well, how do I tell these 2 people apart? Because this person's coming from here and this person's coming from there. What is that? And so then they start to look at, at essays and go, okay, this is starting to give me some more information, some more context. So I would say they matter most for students who are oftentimes at more selective schools. They'll matter a little bit more. For less selective schools, they often matter less. It's like, if you got good grades, you're in. And then beyond that, I would say the other essays that matter are your supplemental essays, which we're not going to talk about today. That's mostly what we're talking about on Thursday. But I would say that, they matter more for more selective schools. Okay, so I want to get into just a little bit of some of those topics that are a little bit more common, or that maybe even some ones that I wouldn't necessarily recommend, because this is something that students ask us about. Now, just a heads up, I'm not saying that you shouldn't write about these in your application. I'm just saying that if you choose one of the topics that I'm getting ready to show you, and you make it the main topic, like the main thing you're writing about in your application, it could be that you're going to be in a pile of essays with other students who are writing about these things. And some of these, I don't know, may surprise you. So here's a list of topics that we tend to see at College Essay Guy. So students who are writing about, for example, common sports like baseball and basketball and football and tennis, or writing about common instruments, like, maybe you're writing about, the piano or violin, or, robotics is an extremely common topic. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't find a way to maybe potentially weave these into a paragraph. That's something that you can do. I would say definitely put these things in your activities list, which is what we're going to talk about also on Thursday. But I would say mostly, if you choose one of these topics, it's going to be easier to blend in. Now, having said all this, here are a few more topics to almost certainly avoid. And it's those essays about like the big performance where you're getting ready to go up on stage and you're super nervous, but you're like, I think I can do this. And then lo and behold, you did it. Great. Or the big game essay where you won the game or lost the game, but won in life. Or the sports injury essay where you hurt yourself and it's like, but guess what? I came back as the manager and still contributed to the team. Or, and this has become like less common, but the mission trip essay where you're writing about going to somewhere and meeting some folks and realizing, wow, I have so much to be grateful for. Like, wouldn't necessarily recommend those. And there's another one that wasn't on this list that has become really common, I would say, since the pandemic. And it's students who are writing about anxiety. Now, just a quick side note, anxiety is real and mental health issues are real. And it's something that a lot of students are experiencing. I mean, I experience it. Life is hard. But I would say that one of the things that I talked about in the last 2 years to college admission officers, what are you seeing more common, is like essays about anxiety and depression. Again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't. If it was really important to you and really shaped you, find a way to potentially mention it briefly, but I wouldn't necessarily make it your main topic of your personal statement. Why? Because if this is something, if you've been dealing with mental health issues, anxiety, this is something that, two questions. First of all, is this the best way to demonstrate your skills, qualities, values, and interests? Because that's what colleges are looking for. Okay. So that's a good first question to ask. And if you're not sure, it's maybe because you haven't just brainstormed other ideas yet. It could just be like, this is what I've been dealing with, and this is the biggest thing, so I should write out the biggest thing. And while I can't argue with that like logic of like it's been taking up the most stuff in your brain, and while I might say even like, yes, go write about it like personally and go journal about this, when it comes to the personal statement, ask yourself again, is this the best way to show my skills, qualities, values, and interests? What kind of community member I'm going to be? The second question to ask yourself, and this is a little more like niche, particular to the application, but is this something that I could address briefly in my additional comments section? Now, the additional comments section, which again, we'll talk more about on Thursday, is a section of the application where you can talk about pretty much whatever you want. And I found that students oftentimes will go, okay, could I speak briefly about, anxiety or depression that I felt, and what that happened, what impacts that had on me, what I did about it, and what I learned. And they put that in their additional info section. And then I'll be like, that, you talked about it. Now you can go talk about anything else you want and all these other sides of you in your application, about the ways that you're a pirate, or the way, all the different identities. And so my point here is that there are other parts of the application where you can talk about things like that. But when it comes to your personal statement, you've got one chance to show like all these different sides of yourself. So I want to make sure that you're making the most of it, as it were. Tom, is there anything you want to say before we I want to get to Q&A in a minute or two, but like, is there anything you would add to that or thoughts?
I just shared actually like an article in the chat around anxiety, and in particular how something that I really in working with students of Gen Z, and kind of like you all who have grown up in the age of the internet and having access to like the whole world, right? You have access to basically so many different ways to live life, more than any other prior generation. And I think that's something that I just really want to take a moment to like basically give you a lot of credit for navigating a entirely new landscape that is so unfamiliar, and no other generation before you has really had basically so many possibilities of what life can look like, and concerns whether this one step or this one grade or this one pivot or fork in the road is going to lead to this particular version of a life or this one. And when we can, look on TikTok real quickly to see like, how do you get X or do Y, or how do you not, or prevent, Z. I just want to say that I really give a lot of credit for navigating that, because it's not easy to, it's great that we have so many options, especially when it comes to college, right? In the US, there are, around 4,000 colleges and universities to choose from, which sometimes people hear that number and they're really surprised at that, because, maybe they've heard of like 10 or so. But there's a lot of choices. And I think with that comes a lot of freedom and a lot of the world is your oyster type of quotes. But at that same time, that can be really stressful when you're like, I haven't really taken the time to figure out what that looks like. And I'm also only like 17 and 18. So like, just give me a break. So all that to say, I think people on the other end of admissions, they're not automatons, not yet. And they're real people who are kind of understanding kind of what you all are going through. But also I would say, if you don't feel like they understand, voice that, and voice what you feel comfortable to share.
I think we lost Tom, at least for the moment. There's a sweet, like, I don't know, screen share, like frozen moment that he's doing. I think y'all are still with me. I'm gonna pick up the mic, and Tom will be back soon. So I want to get to like a few questions that came in, and then I want to give y'all. Oh, you're back. Hi.
Am I back? Okay. Hi.
I don't know how much.
Oh, well, that's good.
Do you want to finish what you were saying? Oh, we've lost Tom again. I'm sorry. Oh, Tom, it's cutting in and out. So I'm just going to take over. All right. All right, cool. So I want to do Q&A. I want to give you a quick look at the courses that we're doing this summer. And if you're interested, we'd super love to have you. Here's a quick look. And then this will only take like literally 2 minutes. So I'm doing this course. It's 4 weeks long. It's how to write a personal statement. It's pretty rad. It kind of goes like this. It's brainstorming exercises, starts on June 8th. We're going to talk yes, brainstorming. And then we're going to talk outlining and writing your first draft. We're going to get into revising and then refining. The hope is that by the end of this month with me, that by the end of June, like before 4th of July, as it were, you're going to have a solid draft of your personal statement that you feel pretty great about. Usually pretty good vibes. It ends up being kind of like a communal experience and folks get to know each other and stuff. And I review lots of essays live on the session. And then we segue right into the other parts of the application, which again, we're going to talk about on Thursday, but we're going to talk about things like, how do you know, once you know your personal statement topic, how that fits in with the other supplemental essays that you'll need to write? There's also an activities list you'll need to create, additional info, and all this other stuff. And then how do you know at the end, like, that your application is really doing its job? So it's a super, again, that goes on for 4 weeks. So that by the end of the summer, the hope is that you're able to be like, you know what? I'm pretty solid on my Common App and I've got those pieces done. My hope is that you finish your early schools, if you're applying to any schools early, so that in fall, when you go back in and you're starting your senior year, that you're like, I think I'm actually in pretty good shape. And then for counselors who are on the call, we've got a rad course coming up. Diana will share links in the chat so you can learn more about these on designing and running an effective college counseling department. Sanjay Mitchell has done so much beautiful work on this, and it's all about creating systems that it can help you be more effective as you work with your students. So more to come in the follow-up email. And if you haven't yet, you've still got a minute or two to fill out the form at the top of the link, and then we'll send you a free book. All right. So let's see. Questions. Tom, is there a question? There was one that came in that actually like jumped right out that I was like, ooh, we should hit this one. I want to come back to this one for just a second, even though we talked about it a little bit. But is mentioning mental health issues, even if it's outside your Common App, ever a detriment to your application? Because I think this is something that students wonder about. Are there ever situations where it could be a bad idea? Or are there, and so I'm asking kind of a leading question of like, in what context should students provide if they are going to mention it? So it's kind of a two-part.
Well, hopefully I'm coming in okay. Just give me a nod. Okay, great. I would say the best way to think about kind of whether or not to disclose kind of your mental health is thinking about scars versus wounds, right? So the wounds are things that maybe are still raw and fresh, and in particular, writing about those can just be, because that healing is still processing, you're still going through it. You might just not be ready for that. But the scar is the point at which kind of you have healed and you've found ways to cope and manage, and you might not be 100%. It's still visible, right? But that healing process is kind of underway. And I would say the same goes for kind of the more pragmatic disclosures of your mental health in your college application. In general, I would say as if there are particular supports that you feel that you need to be your best self in college, whether that is particular note-taking services or other forms of support that a college would need to know about in order to be able to help connect you with those and make sure that they have that available. That's where I would say disclosing those in your application is very valuable. But if you don't really feel like it's an absolutely crucial part of the story that you want to share with colleges, or you don't feel like it's something that is really central to them helping plug you into the communities and elements of the college process that will help it be as smooth for you as possible, then it's kind of up to you, as I'd say, as to whether or not you want to disclose those things. I usually it only hurts students when the person on the other end is really worried about the student's ability to be successful independently, right? If students are kind of mentioning that they need a lot of support that maybe the college isn't able to offer, that kind of might be an instance where someone in admissions might have a little bit of concern of a student's ability to be independent and autonomous and successful on their own outside of their current environment. So those are questions to reflect on and think about and talk with your community or your parents, guardians, counselors about in your school. But that's, I'd say, the best advice I can give about that.
Yeah. A couple questions that came in. Someone asked, how do you talk about your activities in a way that basically, weaves them in a subtle way? And one of the tips that I'll give to that, Hannah, is connecting them to a value. So if you want to talk about an awesome project that you did, it's kind of like when you name drop. If somebody name drops a celebrity that they saw, if it comes out of nowhere, you're like, what? Random? But if you find a way to talk about, let's say, this project that you worked on, based on whatever your topic is. So let's say your topic, a student, from a couple of years ago was writing about food. And he was like, my grandfather used to always tell me, finish my ribs. And he's telling this nice story about his grandfather and how he's like, always finish my ribs. He's like, I always try to finish my ribs no matter what I'm doing. And he gives a couple different examples from his activities list that, oh, by the way, I've done this cool stuff. I have these cool achievements. But in each of those, I'm trying to finish my ribs. So my point here is that if you can give the reader, it's kind of like a magic trick. If you can give them something to focus on that is shiny and interesting and draws their attention, then you can kind of bring in this other stuff like, oh, by the way, but you got to do it in the context of whatever your theme is that you've set up. So there are a couple different ways to do that, but that's kind of the general. Yeah, go.
Yeah. Another tip that I give is like, tell them about the weather. And basically, I mean, like use a weather sentence. So like, for example, I love to show compassion, whether that's tutoring in an elementary school or braiding my sister's hair every night and asking her about her day, right? You can kind of use a stacked sentence and use a whether and then a colon or a dash, and then you can kind of list out examples of where you showcase that quality or value in a way that's not like, that time when I was, president of this, I did X, Y, Z. And a lot of times students spend a lot of time talking about the what. And there's a lot of spaces in your application for the what. There's your activities list, your recommendations. We usually talk about what you do with your time. But the why and kind of like getting more into that is something that is not as commonly seen in these essays. So I would say a stacked sentence is a way to subtly put it in that doesn't take up a ton of airtime or a ton of your precious 650 words, but still is like subtly flexing and weaving them into your overall narrative in a way that doesn't feel super braggadocious or repetitive.
Yeah. A couple of folks are asking about essay topics. Like one of the questions is like, can you write about what happened during a competition and a lesson you learned? Or, can you write about, somebody else asked about, let's see, where's the other one? I'll say that I lost it. Oh, I think it was mentoring. So mentoring and competition. So those are on my common list of common topics, which again, I'm not going to say like 100% don't write about them, but I've read so many essays that were about like such and such robotics competition. And usually the robot breaks like at about word 267. And then they're like, what are we going to do? And they like scramble around. And then lo and behold, they fix the thing and they realize the importance of like communication and, but we discipline and hard work and working together. And so I would say it's really hard to make those stand out. And I want to encourage you to use some of the exercises, or we have lots more on the website, to find a topic that would allow you to talk about the meaning and the importance and the value for you, like of that competition or whatever that thing is that you do in the context of a topic that might be a little bit less common. Same thing with mentoring. Usually there's some kind of like a common arc, which I don't even need to get into right now, that these mentoring essays go. And oftentimes it'll put the reader in what I call like skimming mode, where they start to just kind of be like, yep, read this before. And they're looking for like, well, what's different about this one? So I want to say, like, I want to encourage you, now that you've still got some time, and right now is a great time, is to start brainstorming other possibilities. Let's see. Someone asked, what if your grades were dropped for a little while? If your grades dropped, it's not the be all end all. You're going to want to make sure that one, you contextualize it somewhere in the application. So in your additional info section, you say, hey, here's what happened. And two, you want to make sure that you're applying to a wide range of schools, because it could be sometimes students get, for example, lots of like, let's say C's and stuff. And they're like, but I still want to go to Harvard. And it's like, I want to make sure that you're all, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this on Thursday, but I want to make sure that you're even now finding schools that you love and that you can definitely get into. So just because you get bad grades doesn't mean that you're not going to college. It just means that it might mean that there are certain colleges that are open to you and certain colleges that are not as open to you. So I'm trying to be subtle in what I'm saying here, but I want to encourage you to find a wide range of schools that you're applying to. Any summer classes for UC personal insight questions? Why, yes, of course, Yona. We have a whole separate course on that, and that's like a whole thing that I'm doing. And we'll set, just make sure you're on the email list. And if you've signed up for this, you probably are. You can sign up on our website, but make sure you're on the email list, and you'll get word when the UC personal insight question course, because those UC PIQs, which we're not talking about today, are way different. How do I decide what to take, the SAT or the ACT? That, Paul, if you go to the podcast, go to collegeessayguy.com/podcast, and we've got a whole thing on that, and we've got more on that. I'm trying to do kind of like a rapid fire here. What's the best summer timeline to start the Common App? What to do first and when, especially before senior year starts? Jack, you want this, Tom?
Well, I was going to say, it does open on August 1st, so you do have a little bit of time, but you can do it now and roll things over. And we also have an amazing how-to guide for the Common App that was literally just published, I think, last week. So I'm happy to share that in the chat. I'll just pull that up via Google.
My answer to that, Jack, is that the exact cadence that we're leading the courses is what I would recommend. I know that seems kind of obvious, but like I would say write your personal statement over in June. In July, work on your application and your supplemental essays and, you know, the activities list and, you know, whichever supplemental essays you know that you're probably going to need to write. And then you'll be set up. That's like sort of like June would be like personal statement. And then July is sort of like start to the activities list, the additional info, that kind of stuff. Any tips deciding what the important, significant, impressive details to include are versus the unnecessary details to cut out in the personal statement? Annika, put all of your important activities and stuff in your activities list. And if you do that, if you create an awesome activities list, then you'll rest assured knowing that like, okay, all of that stuff is there. If there's stuff that you need to expand on, you can put that in the additional information section. Again, stuff we'll talk about on Thursday. But when it comes to like your personal statement, it's hard for me to give general advice about like what to keep and what to cut. I think it's going to be going back to these principles of like, all right, find a topic that's somewhat less common. And by the way, I've only shared 2 exercises. So I shared I love and I shared identities, but there's also the essence objects exercise. There's the home exercise. There's the uncommon extracurricular activity exercise. There are a couple more, the 21 details exercise, all of which could help you find, and these are, you know, some of these are on YouTube videos, some of these are in the course, but all can help you find interesting, cool topics. So let's do one more, Tom. Let's see, who's the last one? If I'm doing a 6 weeks, that's not, let's do one. What if we have a lot going on? If I'm doing a 6-week summer program, you can watch the recordings. I would argue that you're still going to have more going on in the fall than you have going on this summer. It's just kind of bonkers how busy some. Oh, you know what we could do? Is do the raffle. Tom, will you pick someone at random to give the book away to? I think you're muted.
I absolutely can, and I just shared our YouTube link as well because on the spirit of recordings, we basically record everything that we do. So if you can't make it live, chances are you can find a prior recording or the session you wanted to go to will probably be on there. Let's do the raffle. So what I'm going to do, my imperfect way of doing this is literally scrolling up and down on the sheet of people, and I'm going to just like stop randomly on a certain line, and that person will be who gets a book. Okay, stop. Jonathan Livingston.
That sounds like
Jonathan, are you there?
Oh, do you want to do it that it has to be someone that's here? Let's do that. Let's do that. Is Jonathan Livingston here? Jonathan Livingston going once? This is fun.
Well, we do have his email, so can we send multiple books?
All right, let's do one for Jonathan Livingston, and we'll do one for somebody who's here. But can we do it like
someone who's in the chat who actually says like, yes, I'm here?
By the way, how many people filled out the form, Tom? Do you have a sense?
So the amount of people that filled out the form are 312, and if you want to keep doing it, you can. So, you know, I'll refresh the page. I'll give it a second, you know, just in case people are like furiously typing and sending it in.
Let's do it. Let's do one more. People are just going to be spamming it because then we're going to get somebody who's definitely here. Nyla's like, I'm here.
Sounds good. Okay. So again, the form's at the top. Okay. Jonathan is here. Wait. Jonathan, I am here. Okay. He is here.
We're still going to do a second one. All right. This is.
You want to do one more? Okay, two for the price of one. I love it. Okay. All right. I'm going to refresh the sheet.
That out. Let me just recap really quick what's happening on Thursday. So Thursday, here's what we're talking about. We're talking about we're going to get more specific about the timeline this summer and going into the fall. We're going to talk about what are these other essential parts of your application, your activities list, your additional info, and then we're going to talk about supplemental essays. I'm going to give you an example of a couple awesome supplemental essays. I'm going to talk about if there's something that you want to share about how COVID has impacted your life. There's a specific way that you can do that. So we'll get into that as well. But hopefully by the end of these 2 sessions, you'll have some sense of like, okay, I feel like I have some sense of what's going on here. Oh my gosh. Did you just tell people to did you tell people to say here?
Oh, no, I did not say that. But wow, people really are hungry for books. Reading knowledge is power. Hey.
Wow. If Tyler's
love to see it.
All right, do we have one more person that we could do?
Yes, I'm refreshing the sheet now just to make sure that any of the there were 5 new additions since when we last talked. And I'm going to
this is our participatory group. They already.
I think technically it was 8, but okay, I'm scrolling up and down, I'm closing my eyes, and I'm just gonna stop where I land. Okay. It's Alejandro Caldelas.
Alejandro, you got it.
Is Alejandro here?
We're going to definitely need to trim this video. All right. Thanks. We've got it. Listen, we're going to do 2 more books on Thursday, so come back. I don't know. We need to have a moment where we're like, you get a book, you get a book, you get a book. Thanks, y'all, for being here. Oh, look at you. You're all here. I'm here. I am that. Great.
Come on Thursday. If there's another chance to win. I didn't ask Ethan about that, but I'm going to find a book and send it to someone.
Totally. All right. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for being here. Tom, thanks for being my partner in crime. And
my pleasure.
We will see y'all real soon. Peace.
See you on Thursday. Hopefully. Bye.
Bye.